Hey, it's Rita with this episode of the Deliberate Leader podcast. I am joined by Pranay Lodhia. Pranay is an executive at the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners here in Victoria, in Australia. But more than that, he's a really, really good guy and a leader with over 30 years of experience. Everything from being a CFO, governance risk is under his portfolio. He's currently got the whole kit and caboodle for corporate services at the RACGP. So why was it important for me to have Pranay on the podcast? He is just an awesome leader with a really great set of values, and you'll hear him talk about that in the episode today, and really how he has sharpened and honed his EQ to make him a really deliberate leader. Enjoy. This week, I'm so pleased to be joined by Pranay Lodhia. Pranay, thank you for joining the Deliberate Leader podcast.
Thank you so much, Rita, for asking me.
It's an absolute delight to have you. I know you and I have known each other a long while. We've been colleagues in the health sector, and I know that we share some experience in the university sector, and I know that you've got loads of different types of experiences to share with our listeners. So I was really looking forward to our chat today.
Thank you so much, and I really am happy to share my experience, I suppose, and my journey with you and the listeners. So thank you so much.
Wonderful, because that's what that's the stories that people share, are the things that I think we learn and we get insights from.
That's right.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, people, and they can read up obviously and go to your LinkedIn profile to find out a little bit about what you do. But Pranay, if you are at a social event on a Friday night and someone says, "Hey, Pranay, what are you all about? What do you do?" How do you introduce yourself?
It's interesting, actually, because a lot of people do ask me, and I think my default mechanism is that I work in sort of corporate services of the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners. And then I only sort of go into sort of what I do in details if there is a follow-up question. And many times, because leading up with saying that this is my title sometimes puts people off, obviously, and then I don't feel comfortable leading with that either. But and then when they ask me questions, my normal response is that I look after the or head up the corporate functions that support the college and its membership to do what they do best. And I think over time I've learned that leadership is not about the title that you have necessarily, but it's about the privilege of leading a group of people to somehow make the organization that you're working for the staff and for the organization a better place than what you found it. So and it's about how you actually bring the right people on board, how you actually set up a vision, but more than just setting up a vision, how do you direct the execution of it, and also in doing so, help people grow in their roles as well. And now I know this sounds really quite just a throwaway line, but it is important because we're all spend a lot of our lives working with people, and I think their careers are a responsibility of the leaders for whom they work for. So it's also about how we develop people as well. Yeah, brilliant. I agree with you that if I'm ever out, I try and avoid telling people what I do. So I try and avoid identifying myself by title. One, because it's often not interesting, really. It's interesting to us. And, people they might go, "Oh my gosh, another leadership development consultant." Yeah.
I don't want to talk to, or whatever it is, right? And so I encourage people to introduce themselves with what we call here at the Deliberate Leader an impact statement. So, what is that impact that you are here to have on this planet?
Exactly.
So can we play a little game, Pranay?
Yeah, and
put you on the spot.
right, because remember that if I tell people I'm the Chief Financial and Corporate Services Officer, people would actually start to fall asleep sometimes. So,
yeah. Well, that's right. And it depends on what I think often it's not so much us or the role, but the experience they've had perhaps with someone else in that role.
That's right.
So if we were just to play a little game, like forget that anyone's listening, right?
Yeah.
If I was to say to you, hey, Pranay, what's your impact? Like, why do you believe that you are on this planet? What would you say to that?
What's my impact? I think to leave whatever I touch or whatever wherever I work, whatever I touch, whoever I come across, leaving something better or a better place than it used to be, and also helping wherever I can in whatever capacity is helping people achieve their goals as well. And that can be at a personal level, it can be at a friendship level, it can be at a work level, and really to do it with some sort of humility, but also some sort of value set. I mean, you can make an impact in an organization by taking a very type A personality approach and really having an authoritarian type approach to leadership and just driving a bus through things to make an impact. But often what happens is that type of an impact is short-lived, and it doesn't take people on the journey. Now, I'm not saying that the way I like to take things takes everybody on the journey, but wherever possible, you stay true to your values and your ethics as well in doing changes. I'm a big believer in doing right doesn't mean that you have to do things sympathetically, but do it empathetically, but do what's important for what you're trying to achieve for the organizations you're working with.
Yeah, I love that, Pranay, because you started off with leaving things better, and you mentioned this earlier on, like there's legacy built into that, your own legacy, but then also it's for the benefit of the community that you're serving, your team that you're working with, all of that.
Like, for example, at the college, I mean, when I started the college almost 2.5 years ago, my knowledge of the GP profession was very superficial. It was purely from a bystander perspective, and I had opinions on that, right? But when I actually started the college and I understood what the profession is actually advocating for, what it's actually doing to make things better for the community, and how the community relies on a thriving, healthy GP profession, it's so important. I mean, having worked in the hospital sector, I know now how important the sort of the GP profession is in keeping people outside the emergency doors. So how we provide that support to our members, to the new GPs who are in training, is really important. And what we do in whatever we can do has a direct benefit to the GPs in training, to the members, to what we do for the community. It may be indirect, but it does have a real impact in making things better, in getting our systems better, in making our systems more user-friendly, more customer-centric, more intuitive for our members and our people to use, making sure the compliance elements are all covered off, and then making sure that there is a financially sustainable position as we move into the next 5, 10, 15 years to leave the organization in a better financial system, compliance, risk capability than what we found it, makes for a better sort of outcomes for our members as well. Because then we've got more to say, it's better for reinvestment into research, better for reinvestment into advocacy for GPs, better for reinvestment in member support, better for reinvestment in training as well. So you can take that sort of a attitude into any of the organizations that we work for, be it hospital that I've worked for, be it government, or be it education. I was a big sort of believer in making sure universities were financially sustainable for the long term, because it allowed for reinvestment into back into the educational outcomes, and that's what we're here for. So I'd like to think that whatever we do has a direct or indirect benefit to ultimately the mission of the organisation.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you've given us an insight there, Pranay, into the areas that you look after. And, you know, they're critical. Obviously, all functions are critical, but yours in particular, because you're looking at, you know, finance, corporate services, risk, governance, all of that. I'm interested, Pranay, in, you know, if you go back to when you started your leadership journey, were you an accidental leader? Did you fall into leadership? Did it find you, or did you deliberately choose to lead?
That's a brilliant question, actually, Rita, because I was reflecting upon this just last week, and I'll tell you a bit of a story about that. I was always, I suppose, when I started my career, I was ambitious that I wanted to be something or wanted to progress. But I think wanting or being ambitious is one thing, but having the right skills, the right how shall I say, emotional intelligence, those things are much more important in the way your leadership journey is determined. So the reason I was reflecting on this 24th of March was 33 years since I started work and at a local authority in New Zealand, Wanganui District Council, and I actually sent a message to my first boss, who was my boss for about 6 years, because whilst every ambitious accountant at the time wants to be in one of the big fours at the time, or a glamorous bank or something like that, because I fell into the local authority. And I must say that that was the best formative years of my leadership career for the next 6 years that I was there, 7 years that I was there. And the reason I say that is that I had a boss who was who I regard very highly. 𝗍𝗿_Phish is his name, and I hope he listens to this. But he was really instrumental in guiding not only my professional skills development, but my leadership capability. And not in the sense that, oh, he taught me this is what you do, but in the way he led and the questions that he asked as a leader, and also providing me opportunities that I would not have been provided at a very early stage of my career if I was working for, say, a big four or a bank. I mean, within, he just threw me into things. And one of the favorite stories that I tell is that within 2 or 3 months of starting, he asked me to interview a group of about 100 staff and write a report on whether this government or public local authority department should be turned into a trading enterprise. Now, he said, I need you to interview about 10 management staff and 90 people who actually put the drains down, put the roads down, who are working as workers and talk to them about what they do, how they do it, that actually made a huge impact in the way I actually talked in my leadership development down the track. And the reason I say that is that the way you engage with them at different levels is important in what they tell you and how you actually perceive the importance of what they do. And that really shaped the way I engaged in future with, say, doctors or academics. And it taught me the art of listening, and it taught me the art of being able to engage at a level that they feel comfortable with. Not where you feel comfortable with, but they feel comfortable with. And those type of things, little lessons, made a lot of difference. And then throughout, things like he threw me into 2 or 3 years out of my university. I had to prepare the whole financial statements of an organization, which was a large organization in the context of where it was, and just threw me at it. And those type of opportunities I would not have got if I was working in a CA firm. I was thrown into doing a whole costing model for the local authority, looking at even activity-based costing type stuff at the time, looking at systems, looking at the underpinning finance systems and other systems that actually feed into it. So those type of little gems I found were important. So my leadership style, I think, was formulated by the opportunities that somebody gave to me at that particular point in time. Now, obviously, I was ambitious as well, but that's one of the reasons I'm really, really particular about developing people as they come through organizations that I've worked for as well.
It's a bit of a pay it forward for you because it was done for you.
I suppose it is in a way. And it's also, I've been asked many a time to be a coach or a mentor to people, and I don't prescribe to any theoretical concepts about leadership, because I think it's all situation based. It's also, there's a lot of psychology involved, but what I can share is my experiences in various situations in dealing with things. But one of the things also it taught me very early is how to stay true to your values. And that was important as I was working through my career, because I've had some instances where my values have not aligned with the organization, and I've had to make a choice. And those were really important, because I'm one lead. I've had instances where I felt that colleagues of mine in my past roles were more worried about themselves and their careers rather than the organization. So, and the manner in which they did things were not, in my view, sort of aligned to what I thought were values. So
those values, Pranay, I mean, often in leadership programs, they're included as an activity to do. Yeah. Did you have a strong sense of your values from like a kid? Are they values that were in your family that you grew up with, or do you find that they have evolved as you've had new experiences?
I think both. I think there were some firm values as a kid. My dad was a school teacher. He's retired now, and he was a school principal, and he was also very big in the union side as well. So the concept of social justice and fairness and all of that was important to me as I was growing up. I even led protests when I was a kid, as many kids would do. So I think when I went into my leadership roles, whilst there is sometimes people think that there's a mutually exclusive thing about becoming a CFO and having that, so I think they're not mutually exclusive. It's about balancing it and having the overall clarity about what's fair and what's right. And fair and right doesn't always mean that you side on the side of the staff or the organization. It's about what it's a judgment call. And one of the critical things about leadership is how you play that judgment calls and when do you do it and how do you actually push and pull on various matters to get the overall overall construct of what you're trying to achieve right and fair. So I think in any leadership, I think judgment is a big, it's often underrated because as a leader, I think you have to make judgment calls on a daily basis. And sometimes there's no formula for that. It's not a formulaic assessment. It's a culmination of experience, foresight, and just looking at who you're dealing with, the personalities you're dealing with, their emotional background. So there's a lot of things that goes into doing being a leader and making a judgment call on things.
Yeah, you mentioned so judgment, obviously a key critical competency or capability, and then the other thing you mentioned is EQ, and maybe I'd love to explore that a little bit more with you. So we are the deliberate leader, and we talk about deliberate leadership, and I'm very curious around what your definition of that is. So when you think about characteristics, capabilities, qualities of a deliberate leader, what comes to mind for you?
So when I was earlier part of my career, I thought EQ was all about the soft skills and how you actually how you come across to your staff and how you EQ is about doing things that keep your staff happy and keeping everybody happy. As I sort of gained experiences in different leadership roles, one of the things I realized, EQ is not about that at all. EQ is about having the, I think, ability to know what may be different consequences at a people level of different decisions or pathways that you may need to take. And EQ is about being able to anticipate those and put actions in place that will minimize any impact on people. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be always one of the best things about is if you noticing poor performance somewhere, EQ, my traditional thinking about EQ long way back would have been that, how do I bring this up? Maybe I should just leave it for now, let the person work it through and all of that, and just coach them into becoming, doing things differently. But in reality now, the best thing you can do for the person, and if you are actually operating with it, is how do you bring it to their attention without them feeling disenfranchised or even feeling like, oh my God, I'm really bad at this, and then allowing them the opportunity to grow, but doing it at the right time. And that doesn't go only for individuals, but goes for the broader organizational change as well. So I like to think that in any organizational change, and I've done a lot of changes over my career thus far, that I've brought an element of EQ. And EQ is also about being authentic to driving those changes, fronting up to the hard messages, fronting up to the fact that you own this change, not putting it onto somebody else, and fronting up to those difficult conversations that you might have about why you're doing this, you're affecting our livelihoods or something like that. But fronting up to that and being able to listen to that and take that on board, and make changes that you think are necessary because of that feedback. So EQ is not only about being sympathetic, but it's also it's about being empathetic. It's understanding that there are consequences to your actions and how you actually translate that into impacts on people, but the messaging and all of that is about having good EQ. So I think my notion of EQ has shifted over the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, what you talk about there really aligns with a lot of what good leaders do, which is operating from a position of strengths and strength-based. So, I see a lot of leaders that either lack confidence or are adopting practices that will impact someone's confidence negatively. And it's usually when we go in, we want to have the feedback conversation. We're gearing up for a really challenging, difficult conversation.
That's right.
We deliver the message, but in that we're not really celebrating anything about the person or telling them the value they add.
Yeah.
Having said that, I'm not a massive fan of the sandwich method of feedback, which is kind of good, bad, good.
Yeah.
But I think if leaders were more in tune with what is that strength that you bring to the team, and letting people know that frequently, it builds up confidence. So then, so we're kind of, there's that care element in there, for our people. And I think it helps people to feel a little bit more whole as opposed to criticised.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always, it's not on, I think leadership is not always about being liked. It's about being sort of respected. And not, I don't mean respect in that sort of subordinate superior way, but respect in terms of the person that you are and how you go about doing that. And look, I've learned throughout my career that you're only as good a leader as the people who you're working with and you surround yourself with. And you've got to celebrate that. You've got to make sure there's enough celebration of, what people achieve during the course of, and it doesn't have to be big celebrations. Just sometimes it's about a timely thank you. I noticed that was fantastic. It's just enough. So.
Yeah. On that thing about not needing to be liked, a lot of leaders struggle with going from maybe a member of the team to all of a sudden leading the team and not, almost wondering whether we should be friends, should we continue to catch up on the weekend? What's your view on that?
So when you migrate from being a colleague to
a leader,
I think that is sometimes the hardest thing. It's easier going into an organization new as a leader, but when you migrate from being a colleague to a leader, I think that is the most challenging thing. And I think sometimes what makes it more challenging is the unsaid things amongst the colleagues and the leader. So that breeds a lot of misunderstandings, miscommunication. So my view is that in a lot of situations, people then, what they do is they make the easy decision. And the easy decision is to separate themselves from that friendship circle, right? Or colleague circle. And basically say, well, I'm a leader now. I don't need to, I should not be engaging. And they may do it out of not protection for self, but protection, what they think is a protection to the team. I think in those type of situations, what you can do is be, as you said, be deliberate about it. Talk to your ex-colleagues who are now sort of reporting to you about, look, this is the change we're having, right? I've been one of you guys, now I'm going to be leading this team. And you may be a CEO, you may be a CFO, you may be even just a senior manager who's mine. Now, I will have a different way of doing things to what I was as a colleague. That does not change the fact that we have been colleagues before and you know me well enough. So please feel free whenever you think that things are not working, at least have a chat to me about the fact that things are not sitting right and we can work it through. Now, when we meet outside, and we should continue meeting outside, we should meet as colleagues, right? We should meet as friends and we should not talk about work at all. And if we feel inclined, let's have some triggers that we say, okay, well, we'll bring this back to work. But just by having that conversation in itself, I think makes a lot of difference. It puts it out on the table rather than things that are left unsaid. So I think that's being deliberate about that is very, very important in those type of circumstances. The other thing is that yes, you may not be able to engage. One of the in every social activity sometimes, but that's okay as well. But as long as the people are understanding of that as well. I mean, I've had a situation where currently we've got a CEO who is our colleague and has migrated into the CEO space, and the way I feel like she's navigated that has been absolutely amazing. Georgina has been absolutely fantastic, and in keeping that balance, but also keeping and what I can see is that we've got a senior executive that is all supportive and behind her, and have her back, and making sure, because we believe in the vision she has set, and we believe in the way, and she leads with empathy, and as well as a really good focus on the future. So I think people buy into that eventually. People buy, not eventually, but people buy into that. People can see that.
Yeah. They and it goes back to what you said about that respect, which is not, and your point was, it's not hierarchical respect. It's because you respect what the person is there,
absolutely,
to offer in terms of their value.
Yeah.
I'm interested, because we were talking obviously about when you go from being colleagues and a friend to then the leader. For you, no doubt you've had lots of transition shifts of leadership. So I imagine back when you were working, with Dave. You said you're ambitious, and then he obviously nurtured that career. But you would have had multiple leadership transitions, Pranay, to get to where you are, which is now, that executive level. What was the most challenging transition? Was it, going from a technical expert to leader? Was it then going from leader to middle level leadership, then to executive level leadership? What's been the most challenging for you?
Interestingly, the most challenging one is not about progressing from one to the other. It's about leaving an executive level role.
Yeah, okay.
And that was simply because the values did not align with it. And I'll tell you why it did an impact. As leaders, we all develop a persona of ourselves and what we'd like to think of ourselves. And then when that is sometimes challenged, either because of values misalignment, and therefore, and we all have a tendency to, I think as leaders, we have a tendency, and that's why we become leaders, is that we want what we do respected, right? Because, and how we lead respected. And sometimes when that is actually challenged, and it may not be challenged for the right reasons, that has an impact on the way you perceive yourself, or it creates a lot of self-doubt. Now, the biggest fallacy, and I think the whole not current, but in the past, about leaders, is that leaders are not vulnerable, right? We all think that because they're in a leadership position, they're not vulnerable, and therefore they don't, they're very strong and resilient. And yes, they are. But the challenge is when these type of things happen, it does have an impact in terms of how you perceive yourself. It has an impact on your ego as well. And I think one of the biggest challenges was navigating that, moving away from a role that did not align with it, and the way people, and actually it having an impact on how I perceive myself, because of the fact that I suddenly went from not being an executive to basically, not being that executive level at all. And I think that had an impact, but it also, in a couple of situations like that, what it does, it actually helps you become a lot more humble about your next leadership role and how you navigate that, knowing that sometimes a lot of these things, you cannot allow your role or your title or things like that, you can't allow that to dictate the framing of yourself. And that is so important, is that you're more than that title, and you're more than that leader role that you play. And I think that in itself was a big thing for me, to sort of let go of being defined by being a CFO or a COO or a vice president or something like that. And yes, that's still important to me, but I don't know whether I define myself purely as that anymore, which probably 10, 15 years ago I would have.
Yeah, it kind of it's almost, back to the start where we started around the impact that you have as opposed to your role when you're introducing yourself.
Yeah.
Pranay, what's been your most memorable leadership lesson?
Ooh. Exactly that you are not the role that you are.
Yeah.
And you cannot allow other people to define you. And you don't need validation from other people for your own self-worth as a leader. And that was really important, because as a leader, you need to have confidence in the way you do things. And that may be different to others. And then that's one of the things I found, that my leadership style, I felt, and people may not felt so, but I felt was very different to other traditional CFOs or COOs. And I think my biggest lesson was, it was okay. I didn't need to fit to a particular mold. And I didn't need to fit a particular style of COO or CFO or things like that. And it was okay to be different. During COVID, I remember we started when I was working at the government, I started a weekly newsletter and with the team, and I started sharing my own COVID ups and downs, thoughts that I was going through, books that I was reading, or what I was sometimes. And I think what I found through that is, even that, whilst it was not intended to be that, but it became that people suddenly resonated with that because they were going through the same thing. And whilst they think their leaders are infallible, it made them feel like that there's a human there as well. And so I think that is really important, to be as human as you can be, and really, it's okay, if you don't know everything about everything, it's okay. And as a leader, one of the other things I found is that you don't have to be the functional expert at anything to be a leader. You have to have enough knowledge to ask the right questions, and you have to have enough other knowledge, but you don't have to have the functional knowledge. But your ability to bring people together and motivate them to get a particular outcome, that's more important as you go, progress in your leadership journey.
Yeah, that being human comes back to the point that you made about vulnerability, and
exactly.
that often we think that leaders are not vulnerable, but we are. And leadership, I've often, and I know others experience this too, but it's lonely. You don't always have that sounding board that you do at a different stage of your career.
And it's important to, you can be a leader in the most glamorous of organizations and still feel very isolated and lonely, because the people that you work with, you don't have an alignment of values. So I'm really fortunate that my last couple of roles, or even before that, wherever I've had the best enjoyment out of my roles, be it at universities, be it as at hospital here, is because the people I worked with were genuine, down to earth, good people with similar value sets, and that's what matters. And if you can find that, I think, everything else falls into place, hopefully.
Yeah. What are you still learning about, Pranay, in leadership?
I think I'm still learning about people, right? And I think there is when you're working with people, most leadership books that you read, or most leadership theories or frameworks that you apply, they're very two-dimensional. What sometimes, because in aim to try and simplify things, it puts tools into place and things like that. But what it doesn't actually do is, where you come in as a leader, is the situation that you're actually finding yourself in, whether those tools can be applied to that situation or not. The personalities that you're dealing with and their own emotional baggages that they come into work with as well, or their own personalities or motivations that you have to deal with. And that's different for everybody. And you've got to be attuned to some things like that, so you can know that you can talk to one person in a particular manner and get the outcome that you want, but the same manner that you talk to somebody else about it, you can totally have an unintended outcome. So there's no one thing. There's no one thing that fits everybody's different. And I think that's where I'm still learning as to how do you deal with different situations, different people, different personalities, different motivations. And I think one of the other things that I'm beginning to learn about myself is calling things out respectfully at the right time, rather than letting it, because sometimes I think as humans we don't like confrontation at all, and how we bring things to a head, how we actually address it, is a skill in itself, and that's something I keep learning.
Yeah, I think it's a great point around we can have access to all the frameworks, the books, the tips, the tricks, but your point there that I'm hearing is only you can personally know the context, the people, their personalities, what's going to fit. Yeah,
and how you apply those things. Yeah,
and it's still working it out.
Yeah, and that's where some of the things that you and I've talked about in the past, but also the things that you've worked with in the past with my team, is really helpful. And that's about understanding yourself, your strengths, your motivators, and how that fits in within the team. Those type of things are really important, because I think they help. The tools that you brought in, and we workshop with it, was helpful in us understanding ourselves and how we integrate as leaders with each other. So those type of things are very important. And knowing yourself. I mean, I think one of the best things I found out about myself is that I needed to talk to think. Yeah. So I know now that whenever I have meetings with my team, I'm thinking. So I'd rather have shorter meetings where I have time to think than I read something, digest it, and send it back. Or the fact that there's some things that came naturally to me, and I needed to be okay with that and run with it and build on those strengths. So strengths-based leadership and things like that is really good things to learn about. So you can bring that, you can work with things that are your strengths, and then have people around you which can complement you as well. The other thing is that I think one of the greatest things that I learned, for example, at one point in time, going back a while, was that I was a lot big picture thinking, and also, so because I learned about that about myself, I had to make sure that I trained myself to make that whenever we have meetings about things, that I come back to what are the actions from here, how do we execute this, rather than leaving it, because my natural space was to do that big picture thinking, or have people around me that are really good at executing as well, and work with people like that. So
Yeah, it's a superpower, I think, Pranay, when we know ourselves well enough, that connects into EQ, which you mentioned a couple of times through our chat, but also when we're taking the time to learn about others.
Yeah.
Because one thing you said right at the start was, it's about engaging people so they feel comfortable and heard, as opposed to you feeling comfortable and heard. And so it is always in service of others, which is a big theme of your leadership story today.
Yeah, but I'll be honest with you, that's not always easy, and that you don't always get it right. I mean, I know that I don't always get it right, and you've got to be. You can't have sort of this rose-colored glasses about yourself that you will always get it right, and it's something that you have to just keep working at it.
Definitely. How boring otherwise. We'd have nothing to learn.
Exactly.
And all right. Well, Pranay, thank you so much. I've loved our conversation. Obviously I've known you over the years, but I think your nuggets there are spot on, and it's really bringing it down to basics. The thing that's coming out most for me out of this conversation is you in service of others and that legacy, which is very, very impactful. So thank you for being on the Deliberate Leader podcast.
Thank you so much, Rita, and I hope that I can actually help other people in their journeys as well through my experiences. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Pranay.
Thanks.
Hey there, it's Rita. I hope you really enjoyed that episode with Pranay. What a deliberate leader. Pranay took us all the way back to the start of his career, saying that he was really an ambitious guy. So leadership for him certainly wasn't an accidental path, but I don't think he knew that he was going to get there in the way that he did. His teams respect him. He is respected by fellow colleagues of his executive teams wherever he's gone. And he's had a really interesting career with everything from universities, hospitals, and now a college of general practitioners and everything in between. Pranay really dug deep on two aspects in particular for leadership: EQ and judgment, and also talked a lot about his value set, where that comes from, and how he applies it on a daily basis. My last question to Pranay was, what are you still learning about? And his answer there was people, and he gave us some really good insights into what, still piques his interest around his people. And the fact that, he's that lifelong learner, that certainly came through. I hope you really enjoyed that episode with Pranay. See you soon.